Welcome to day 2 of Shadowhunters month, and this is the first countdown video. This is a countdown that's going to be focusing more on the books and the show. I am doing a similar video to this about the show at another point, but this countdown is my top 10 favourite book characters. So obviously not really going to be talking about the show. This is characters from the whole kind of range of Shadowhunters books that I absolutely love. And there were so many characters and so many people who came that close to making the list, but I had to make a decision and it was really difficult, but I did come up with my top 10 favourite characters. And just because there were so many out there that I love, I feel like this list could change all the time, you know, as I reread the books and stuff. But as it stands right now, this is a list I'm happy with. So yeah, to celebrate some of Cassandra Clare's greatest characters, these are my top 10 favourite characters from the Shadowhunters books. And kicking things off at number 10, it's Jordan Kyle. The thing I love most about Jordan is the tragedy of him and the complexity of what he tries to do to make amends for his mistakes. You know, we got this impression of Jordan through Maya when she was first introduced, that, you know, he did this terrible thing, he was turned into a werewolf and he attacked her and then just abandoned her to deal with it herself. And then he actually shows up kind of undercover in a way, and then we find out who he really is after he's kind of established a good friendship with Simon. You know, they move in together, he joins Simon's band, and then this whole secret is exposed where it turns out that this Kyle that Simon had befriended was actually Jordan. And we see that when Jordan attacked Maya, he'd only just been turned into a werewolf. That was his first time changing, so he wasn't in control of his actions, but at the same time he still did that to Maya. He still left her, but he joined the Praetor Lupus to try and make amends for everything. He was, you know, always keeping an eye on Maya. That's why he took on Simon's case with the Praetor. He formed a really nice bond with Simon that I really loved. One of my favourite kind of romances. And he kind of spent every waking minute of his life trying to make amends for what he did to Maya and trying to make it up to her, which led to them getting back together and having this kind of... It's weird because they were in a relationship, but it's still kind of a will they won't they, because obviously Maya kept going back and forth with good reason about whether or not she should still be with Jordan, and ultimately she did decide to break up with him, but before she could do that, he was killed by Jonathan, adding to the tragedy of it all. I feel like deep down, Jordan knew he was never going to be able to fully repent for his sins and truly make up for what he did, but that didn't stop him trying. And I always found that quite an endearing quality to him, and he was just such a complex and layered character as it was, and it helped that he kind of interacted with Simon, who I really love, and Maya, who I really love. And it was just this unfortunate sequence of events that kind of changed him and his life, and therefore it affected others. And no matter what, I feel like nothing he could have done would ever be good enough, and that's sad in itself. But then he had this brutal, tragic death for him that went on to affect Maya and Simon in very different ways. But he had this huge impact as soon as he was put into the books, and I just really felt captured and almost inspired by his story in a weird way. His perseverance was kind of unrelenting, and it's almost kind of beautiful in a way that he did die before Maya could break up with him, which sounds really morbid, but it's bittersweet. It was a bittersweet end to a very bittersweet story, and that's why Jordan just about made the list. And it's kind of good that Jordan was at number 10, because at number 9, a very good segue, is Maya Roberts. It actually took me a little while to get used to Maya and take to her when she was first introduced. Because I kind of grown to love all these characters in the first Mortal Instruments book, and then suddenly Maya came along and had a lot of focus. I was like, who the hell are you? Why should I care? But then we learned a lot more about her, and I was like taken with her, almost straight away. As soon as she kind of interacted with Simon, really, I was like, well, I'm on board. And I kind of already delved into her past with Jordan, which made her really complex and interesting. But she formed some really good bonds with the likes of Simon. And she's just this incredibly strong character, this incredibly strong woman who's been through so much, kind of lost her whole livelihood and her whole future that she'd had planned for her. And no matter what, she persevered in a very different way to Jordan, but she still persevered through it all. She came back from it. She found her place in the world all over again, which I feel like a lot of people wouldn't have the strength to do, but Maya was able to do it. And then she kind of ended up getting her own story throughout the Mortal Instruments, which I really enjoyed, particularly with Maureen, and she found a really clever way of kind of stopping Maureen. And then she kind of, there was this tragedy of Jordan dying, and she went through hell. On and off with Jordan. And she felt this guilt over him, and if she was just stringing him along, because I don't think she really was sure how she felt about him, Jordan, a lot of the time. Because she had kind of a brief thing with Simon, and then she had this, and she found it really difficult to wrestle with, which I really kind of felt moved by that story. And then again, just tragedy upon tragedy. Jordan died, and they could never really make things right. But she carried on fighting, even though she'd lost this huge person to her, whether or not she hated him or not. You couldn't deny how much of her life was given to Jordan. So to have that taken away and this huge chunk of her past gone, she still fought through it. It says so much about her resilience that I just really, really admire. And she still kind of found a bit of happiness with that, hopefully, which is kind of sweet. And, she's still kind of flourishing now in the mentions we've got of her since the Mortal Instruments. And yeah, I just think she's an incredibly strong character with a very inspirational kind of mindset and story, and that's why Maya's on the list. At number 8, it's Jonathan Morgenstern, kind of the big bad of the second half of the Mortal Instruments. He was always going to be kind of a major character because of his ties to Clary, being her brother and Valentine's son. And with Jace and everything, he had these really complex relationships with Jace and Clary and Valentine and Jocelyn. And he was just a damn good villain. But there's, again, with a lot of characters in Shadowhunters, there's this underlying tragedy, because there was this potential to be a really amazing person, and this guy he could have been, but because of Valentine and his experiments and everything, he was just kind of destined to become almost like this monster, which is heartbreaking. And especially when we see glimpses of the Jonathan that could have been in Clary's dreams or visions, and when he's dying at the end of book 6 of Mortal Instruments and Jocelyn's kind of cuddling him, these brief flashes of what could have been adds this level of tragedy to an incredibly evil person. But he was evil for reasons that were kind of taken out of his hands before he was even born. So he did some awful, awful things, and you kind of love to hate him. But I could never truly kind of hate him. He's a horrible person for the most part, but he's a fantastic character. And again, really layered, and he had a very interesting kind of parallel with Jace and the way they both were raised and how they operated their lives. So I found that really interesting. And then this very kind of disturbing infatuation with his sister. That goes quite dark at some points of the Mortal Instruments. How it all ends, kind of, it's an inevitable end for him, really. But that doesn't take away from the sadness of it all and the tragedy of, you know, Jonathan's life. Right from the off, he was kind of destined to die, in a way. And so many things he did still have an impact in the Shadowhunters universe today in ongoing book series, you know, long after he's dead and gone. So you can't really deny the impact he had on the whole Shadowverse, and that's why Jonathan simply had to make the list. At number 7, and please don't hate me for putting him this low down, it's Magnus Bane. Magnus is extravagant, he's sassy, he's funny, he's magical, quite literally, and he has these amazing kind of relationships, this amazing history and story. It's kind of, you'd have to be trying very bloody hard to not love him. Right from the off, when he's introduced in the first Mortal Instruments, he has this layer of mystery and majesty about him that I've always found really intriguing, and as we learned a bit more about him and he started opening up to things, we kind of realised how much of a deep and rich past this man had. And I think we've still barely scratched the surface of the things he's done, even with books like the Bane Chronicles coming out. But it's just, he's such a fascinating person. The way he dresses and holds himself, everything he's been through, the relationships he's had with characters, you know, in the past and the present, and hopefully relationships he will have in the future. You've seen him grow so much, even though he's already done a lot of growing before we even met him, because obviously he's an ancient warlock. But we've seen him fall in love again and again and again. His relationship with Alec is obviously so special. And it was great seeing that kind of play out and shape and mould him. His interactions and relationships with Will and Tessa and Jem, with Ragnar and Katarina. I'm always so desperate to learn more about Magnus's past, so whenever we get snippets of it, I always love it, which is testament to what an incredible character Magnus is, and the loyalty he has with everyone. How he's one of the few characters who can have this kind of connection to so many different generations of the Shadowhunters kind of characters. I mean, I feel like it says it all that Magnus has been, I think he's been in basically every single book, I'm pretty sure, however briefly, but I think he's always been there, and I think that says it all. That's all you need to know about Magnus, because he is almost the heart of the series, because he's like the constant, who's always part of the action, and he can be funny and snarky, but he knows when he needs to be serious. He's very level-headed, he has a tragic past again, but we've seen him through Alec and through many other means get over many of his tragedies throughout his past, and we saw Alec kind of heal his heart, which I really loved. And it's kind of endearing that this ancient warlock who's centuries old can still be relatable, and he doesn't know everything, because even with such a long life and having lost so many people, he still gets out of bed every day, and he still finds something to live for, and he's great in a crisis. He's just the most brilliantly written character, and almost the heart of Shadowhunters, so of course Magnus had to be on the list. Number 6 on the list is Jem Carstairs, or James Carstairs, however you prefer it. Man, we're really getting into my loves right now. Right from the off, Jem's story really grabbed my attention, and I was captivated by it so quickly. He was probably the first character in the Infernal Devices I really took into my heart. I mean, across the first book, by the end of book 1, I was like, I love everyone. But I was always really intrigued by Jem. And his condition with, like, Ian Fenn needing that, and he was dying. His parabatai bond with Will is just something so special and incredible. His relationship with Tessa, very deeply complex. You know, the relationship between all three of those characters, really. Something fantastic and so beautiful. And his story of kind of falling in love with Tessa at the same time Will did. Unwavering loyalty to Will and Tessa and all the people he cares about. Even though he was dying, he was still throwing everything he had at every single situation. And he was selfless. You know, when he was on his deathbed, he still forced Will to kind of go and save Tessa, because that's what needed to happen. In one of my favourite scenes in all of Shadowhunters. And he's a very complex person, but at the same time you get a real good sense of who Jem is. You could just say, well, he's loyal, he's kind, he's a good fighter, he can find love almost anywhere he looks, which is very endearing. But at the same time he has all these layers to him that I just really admire. The way his story played out, how he became a silent brother, bittersweet in that, and how he was, you know, with Will when he died of old age, and then he finally got his happy ending with Tessa years and years later after the events of the Mortal Instruments. The whole twist of him being Brother Zachariah was just crazy and stuck with me for so long when I put 2 and 2 together about who he was. You know, he waited for so long for his happy ending, and he finally got it. And you know, he has this really nice relationship with Emma as well, in, you know, the current books. And he's almost like Magnus in the sense now that he has connections to so many different people, and he's kind of always there. But he has such a beautiful story and a very beautiful kind of soul as a character, and that's why I love Jem so much. Number 5 on the list is Julian Blackthorne. For a younger man as Julian, he has been through some shit. Life has thrown him some really shitty hands, and he still battles through them with the best of his ability. He is, I think, one of the strongest-willed and just overall kind of strongest people in terms of like his mindset in all of Shadowhunters. You know, he's basically running the Institute by himself, while also looking after his entire family, having all that weight on his shoulders, but he kind of was so good at hiding it, mainly because I think he still had his love for Emma to kind of get him through. And that, you know, whole can of worms, his relationship with Emma, you know, a parabatai bond, but he's fallen in love with his parabatai and she's fallen in love with him. Very interesting kind of thing there, and obviously we still don't know the conclusion to that, because the final Dark Artifices book is out next month. So fucking excited. But that's a very interesting kind of way of presenting the parabatai bond, because obviously we kind of had that with Alec, thinking he was in love with Jace in the Mortal Instruments, but obviously it wasn't kind of going both ways, whereas this is with Julian and Emma. But he's had to deal with so much at such a young age, and he carried so much burden, still does, especially after Livy's death. And he has this awful guilt complex. He feels guilty about absolutely everything he does. He never feels like he's good enough or he's doing enough. And even though he absolutely is, things happen and the world just seems to be against him, and is almost trying to prove to him that he's not, so he's believing it, and it's just so tragic in that sense. You know, for every good thing that happens to Julian, 10 bad things happen. He just kind of has the worst luck in the world. Poor Julian. But it helps that he's kind of grew this attachment to him when he was introduced as quite a younger, boy in the Mortal Instruments. And I think he was in the story in Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy. And then we kind of saw him a bit more grown up throughout Dark Artifices. And it's, we don't see every single character in Shadowhunters kind of go through those stages of their life and actually physically grow up, whereas we have got that with Julian, which kind of helps you form an emotional attachment to him right from the off. And then with all this guilt and all this weight he carries and how hard he works and pushes himself to the brink of exhaustion every single day is a trial for Julian, but he still battles on to the best of his ability. He kind of deserves the world, but the world doesn't deserve him. And I just love the pure strength of Julian, and that's why he's on the list. At number 4, it is Isabelle Lightwood. Oh my god, I love Izzy so much. She grew so much over the Mortal Instruments and beyond. Even in Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy, we saw a lot of growth in her. She was kind of almost bitchy at first, and was just messing around with guys her parents wouldn't approve of. And you just seem like, she's just one of those mean girls. You have her all figured out. And then as the series goes on, peel back some more layers. She had this secret, about her father's affair, and that she kept to herself for so long, and that was eating away at her for years. And then she kind of has this worry about not finding love, even though she's seen Jace and Alec find it, and she was just kind of messing around with guys she wasn't really into and didn't want to be romantically interested in emotionally. And then comes along her relationship with Simon, which is just the most beautiful thing to me. I love those two together, and how she kind of learned to love through him, because she kind of unlearned it almost with everything with her parents. So seeing her gain that back and see her be a lot more humanised, because she was very much in her Shadowhunter mode, but then Simon tells her the Star Wars story as she drifts off to sleep and stuff like that, and she forms these really genuine connections and relationships with everyone. We see her grow closer with Alec and with Magnus and Clary, Simon. She forms these really strong bonds, and she's this incredibly loyal person. She carries a lot of burden herself as well. But we kind of really saw her learn to open her heart to a lot of things. And at the same time, she always took ownership of herself and her body, and she knew what she wanted, she went after it. One of the first scenes in Tales from the Shadowhunter Academy, when she turns up, walks into Simon's class and tells everyone to stay away from her boyfriend. We see that she truly does have these emotional moments, and she does break down. But she learns to not be afraid of showing that across the whole Shadowhunters kind of series. And it's another beautiful character journey, one of many beautiful journeys. And I really do have a soft spot for the Lightwoods. They're probably my favourite family in Shadowhunters. And a lot of that is down to Izzy just being Izzy. You think you've got it all figured out, and then she constantly surprises you, and she's capable of having these really intimate and beautiful relationships with people. Even though you might think you won't get along with her, at first glance, I think anyone could. And that's the beauty of Isabelle. and that's why she's on the list. Number 3 on the list is Mark Blackthorne. The Blackthorne family are another one that I really love deeply, and Mark is again this really complex and interesting character. You know, he's kind of half fairy, and he went through some kind of torture when he was like taken away, and he joined the Wild Hunt. He went through a lot of kind of physical and emotional pain through all that, and formed a relationship with Kieran. He was separated from his family for so long, and then suddenly he was back there, and he had to readjust to the life that he hadn't had for such a long time, and try and recreate these relationships and bonds with his family, even though he was almost a stranger to them, and he was a stranger in his own home, which is tragic. And he forms this incredible bond with Christina that I absolutely love. He's starting to reconnect with his family, and even before he was taken, you know, there was, I suppose, almost racism against him and Helen. So he's always kind of othered and an outcast in that respect. But he was always one of the family, one of the Blackthorns, and then when he's taken and then returned to his family, even then, with the Blackthorns, now he's an outcast there as well, and he has to learn to adapt to that and change. And we've seen him go through so much agony and so much pain, and yet he appreciates the little things in life, and I think that's kind of how he learned to cope with, you know, the bad things that's happened to him. And we kind of see him teach others to do that as well, in a really inspiring and moving way. So I just love the complexity behind Mark, and I hope to see a lot more of him in the future, because I just think he's a brilliant character, and I always get really, really excited when I see that he's featured in this chapter, and that's why Mark has made it this high up. Number 2 on the list is Will Herondale. My god. I mean, this is another character that's just like, look up the word tragedy in the dictionary, it's this guy. I've already mentioned his relationship with Tessa is beautiful. His parabatai bond with Jem is just absolutely stunning. You think he's just pushing everyone away because he's like an arrogant arsehole. But again, you kind of peel the layers away, and it turns out he thought mistakenly that he was cursed and that anyone he loved would die, which is why he didn't let anyone get close to him except for Jem, because Jem was kind of dying anyway. So he didn't want to love anyone or anyone to love him, because he thought it would kill them, even though that whole curse was like a complete lie. And he kind of thrown a huge chunk of his life away, you know, because of that, which is tragic. And he's falling in love with Tessa, but he can't tell her because he's scared of what it would do. And just when he's in the place where he can, she gets engaged to Jem, and he has to hide his heartbreak. He's constantly hiding his heartbreak. And everyone thinks he's like this really kind of strong person, where deep down, you know, he just is dying on the inside. And his heart keeps breaking again and again, but he has to just keep and stay strong and try and conform to what everyone thinks he is. And he has this really amazing relationship with his little sister that I really loved. And yeah, the sheer amount of love he had in people, and the amount of loyalty he gave to people, even though he thought he shouldn't have that love because it would hurt them. It's just such an endearing thing to me, and we kind of saw him throughout his whole life and see how things have played out, and we're going to learn more about that in a future trilogy of books, which I'm very excited for. But yeah, again, a really complex, incredible character who has just been through so much and got the happy ending he deserved, and a really good death as well, if that's possible. A beautiful death, I would say. But one of my absolute favourite character arcs in Shadowhunters, one of the most beautiful stories, and that's why Will is at number 2. If you know me at all, you will know my number one choice is hardly a surprise, but number one on my list of 10 favourite book characters is Simon Lewis. Oh, I love Simon. Mainly, I mean, I am kind of only touching on this briefly because there may or may not be a video coming tomorrow about this subject, but I relate to Simon a lot personally. I found his story very inspiring, seeing him kind of be the underdog and then just grow in this strength and kind of find who he was meant to be in such an incredibly awesome way. And his loyalty and friendships with Clary and Maya, Jordan, George, his relationship with Isabelle, and this really beautiful thing that I absolutely adore. How he kind of forms these really nice on-off friendships with Jace and Alec. His interactions with everyone can be hilarious and heartbreaking at exactly the same time. He's incredibly brave. He sacrificed so much willingly to save the people he cares about. And he just has this really incredible kind of way of being absolutely hilarious in one paragraph, and in the very next one he can break your heart. He can do these really serious storylines, but also he can have a really funny scene. And a lot of characters can't really balance that, but Simon can and does it flawlessly. And he goes through kind of more changes physically, mainly, than any other character, I think, in the Shadowhunters universe. But I've always found him to be someone to really root for, and he's a character I really deeply love and admire. He has this beautiful story, layered with heartbreak, but he also has these really amazing highs with his friends and loved ones as well. And yeah, Simon Lewis, to me, is my favourite character from the Shadowhunters books for an incredible amount of reasons. But right from the get-go, he personally resonated with me and gripped onto my heart and never let go. And that's why Simon is number one. So those are my top 10 favourite book characters from Shadowhunters. Obviously, everyone's list will probably be vastly different. You can agree with my picks, or at least understand the reasons why if you disagree. There might be people who absolutely detest Simon, and I'm sure there are. There'll be people who want me dead for not putting Magnus higher up on the list. People who want me dead for not having Alec on my top 10. He was very close. But I have mentioned before, I like Alec in the books, but I don't love him, whereas I do love him in the show. But yeah, that's my list. And let me know your favourite characters from the books. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed my countdown, and till tomorrow's video, thanks for watching.